Okay, so today we are in Gilbert and I'm going to be highlighting a lesser known neighborhood. It's called Artemina. I find a lot of people, unless they have lived in the more northwest part of Gilbert, are actually unfamiliar with this neighborhood because it's kind of like in the shadows of a very famous community, the Islands, which is directly next door. And if you don't know, the Islands is like it's 1 mile times 2 miles. I mean, it's like basically a mini city. There's so many subdivisions, beautiful lakes, and everything in it. Great location. But a lot of people just are kind of unaware because it's like tucked away right next to the Islands. But I kind of like to think of this neighborhood as like the cooler, younger sister to the Islands. Little more modern homes. You'll see they're newer homes, a little more tight knit community, but it's still the same great location. If you guys are unfamiliar, I'm Courtney Strzelczyk. I'm a local agent here in the Phoenix East Valley. I live in Gilbert. I talk a lot about it and some of the surrounding cities in the East Valley as well. So if you're thinking about moving to this location, my goal for this channel is really to give you honest insight into what it's like to live here because, it's not for everyone, right? There's definitely a good and bad parts of living in the East Valley. So if you want to learn more and you want to follow along, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. Otherwise, you may never see me again. We don't want that to happen. But let's talk about location of this neighborhood first, because that's the one thing you cannot change about a home, right? So like I said, we're in the very northwest part of Gilbert. So the beautiful part about that is you're very close to Highway 60. And if you're like planning on having to commute, or maybe you just want to, go to like the airport frequently, Central Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe, those places that are a little bit more central in the Phoenix metro area, this part of Gilbert is definitely going to be the easiest just because we're the most far northwest and closest to the 60. I mean, literally, it's like maybe it's about 2/3 a mile is the Chandler border right there. And then we're really close to the Mesa border this way too. So really just a convenient location if you're planning on to going to more central Phoenix frequently. The other great part about it as well is it's a little over a mile to downtown Gilbert. You could easily bike there if you wanted to. I would say most people drive, but that could be an option when the weather is nice. And there's also like several other restaurants like right outside, immediately outside the neighborhood. One of my favorites actually, Ryu Cafe. It's a like Turkish Mediterranean restaurant. It's a more of a breakfast brunch spot. It's really good food. Definitely something a little bit different than your traditional American breakfast. But that's like that way, right on the corner of Cooper and Elliott over there. And then one of my favorite coffee shops, Jupiter Cafe, is actually like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minute drive going toward the 60. So honestly, if you're commuting to Phoenix, I'd be driving past Little Jupiter Cafe pretty frequently because their coffee really, really is good. It's a locally owned place by a young family here, and they just have a lot of pride in their business. It's one of my favorite spots. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might go get a cup of coffee after I film this. And let's talk about the actual neighborhood. So like I said, the neighborhood's more of a boutique or smaller community compared to a lot of these giant master plan communities that we see. It's about 200 homes that are here. And, the surrounding area, this part of Gilbert, you'll see a mix. There were some homes that were built in like the 60s, 70s, but most of the development occurred in the late 80s and through the 90s. So like the Islands, Madera, a couple other neighborhoods around here, you're going to see, homes that are 30, almost 40 years old. But this was like the one little pocket that was one of the last pockets to be built. So these were actually built in the early 2000s. A majority of the homes were built between 2001 and 2003. And if you're wanting a neighborhood that feels, has more greenery and trees and shade and yes, more of that mature landscaping, this time period is kind of like the perfect little zone because you don't have, a super old home, but you have enough time, and I'll show you some videos, but like the trees have had time to develop. So it does feel green and lush here. And a little bit more shaded than, some of these new construction communities that we're seeing. A lot of these newer communities, if it's only 3 or 4 years old, like they're going to have baby trees. So it's going to feel a little bit more exposed. And in the summertime, it's not as desirable, in my personal opinion. And the neighborhood has done a really, really good job just maintaining the community landscape. You have a beautiful entryway into the neighborhood. There's a lot of tree-lined streets. There's several different little parks throughout the neighborhood. green spaces. They have roundabouts, beautifully landscaped. So the HOA, there is an HOA. It's going to cover all of that, and that comes to about $95 a month. Actually paid quarterly. But overall, what the HOA includes, of course, the community landscaping, the park. There's a basketball court. I know some agents have advertised it as a pickleball court, but there's not a net there. So, I mean, you could definitely make it into a pickleball court if you want to. The one thing, though, is there's not a community pool. If you're looking for a neighborhood that has a community pool, you're probably going to want to look more in these giant master plan communities. Those are more often than not going to have nicer or bigger amenities, I should say. So, for example, a couple in Gilbert is going to be Power Ranch. That's going to be more southeast. And then another one, even like new construction, like Waterston North, Waterston Central. These are bigger communities, but they do have, they're going to have bigger pools and like clubhouses, that sort of thing. But your HOA is also going to be a little bit higher. Or a lot higher in those communities. So it just depends what you're looking for. But the good thing about this neighborhood is a lot of the homes do have private pools in their backyards, and the yard sizes are large enough to accommodate a pool. And on the note of HOAs as well, if you do want to know what the rules and regulations are for this HOA, they do actually have their CCRs, which is basically like the HOA playbook or handbook, on their website. I'll put the link below so you can see. So that way, like if you're concerned about maybe you want to add an addition onto a house or parking or, any of those things, it's going to be all in there to see what they allow and what they don't allow. So homes, let's talk about the homes. So it's going to be a mix of single and two-story homes. These are fairly large homes overall. It's not going to be your like starter 1,500 square foot home. A majority of the ones that sold in the past year were between 3,000 and 3,800 square feet. They had 4 to 5 bedrooms. A lot of them had 2.5 baths, but we did see a fair amount had 3 full baths as well. And as far as like the architectural design, pretty typical for this time period for the early 2000s. You're going to see the stucco siding. You're going to see the tile roofs, a little bit more modern than, some of the other neighborhoods around here, like I said, that were built in the 80s and 90s. I personally think the exterior of these homes are more beautiful or a little bit more interesting than, in the islands. It doesn't look quite as cookie cutter-ish. However, there is a cohesive palette here. It's, I wouldn't say every home looks super, super unique. There is still some cohesiveness, which keeps the neighborhood looking pretty good, in my opinion. And as far as like the interior upgrades for the homes in this neighborhood, I have seen some where it's all original finishes. I wouldn't say I've seen too many homes that have had like full on renovations. There was one house that sold maybe 5-6 months ago that was, is definitely in the higher price point for this neighborhood, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. I know you probably want to know that, how much these homes are going for. But for the most part, I've seen a lot of these houses where the homeowners have elected to do like either remodeled a bathroom or a kitchen or, renovated like certain aspects of the home, not like a complete gut job. And that's pretty, to be expected, considering these homes are about 20 years old. They aren't quite old enough to warrant or need that full-on renovation. As far as like the yard space or the lot size, pretty medium-sized lots, I would say. You're definitely going to find bigger lots here than a lot of new construction, like further in South Gilbert or, definitely, some neighborhoods in Queen Creek and Eastmark. Eastmark kind of has a reputation, if you didn't know, to have pretty tiny lots. Just as an FYI. But here, for the most part, you're finding lots that are like 7,000 to 10,000 square feet. And I know this means nothing to a lot of people. So basically, it's enough room to have, a pool, some, turf or yard space, and maybe like a little bit of an entertainment area. Now, there are some lots, not many of them, but some of them are like on the roundabout when the street bends. So it's kind of like almost like a cul-de-sac lot or like a pie-shaped lot. So you have a really small front yard, but then you have a really big backyard, which is kind of ideal for Arizona. You don't really want a large front yard necessarily because it's not always like the most usable space. It's just more money to maintain. You want that backyard space, in my opinion. I don't think I've ever had a client that was like, I want a big front yard. But those are like, you may come across one. There's not many of them, but they do pop up on the market every once in a while. Now, as far as pricing goes, for the most part, the majority of the homes are going to be in the 700s. The lowest price home that we saw sell last year was 590, and then the highest price was like a little over a million. And this was that home that was completely renovated, which is definitely what attributed to that higher price point. And also, if you're considering this neighborhood, every neighborhood or home is going to warrant different types of inspections. For the most part here, I would say that the roofs is probably the biggest thing that's going to pop up. Your general inspector will look at the underlayment to see how it is, and then they may like warrant actual roofer come and do a more thorough assessment. For the most part, I think the roofs have been maintaining pretty good integrity, but it is kind of getting to that, you know, time frame where you could see more brittle or curling underlayment, which could lead to leaking if we get a big monsoon. So that's probably one of the biggest things. You could do a sewer scope as well, just for peace of mind. Probably not going to have as much of an issue, but I always have the philosophy it's better to spend that extra $300-400 to make sure you know what you're getting into before you buy a home, because having an issue with the sewer line can be very, very expensive, and you just want to be aware of that before you purchase the home so you don't have a surprise $10,000-20,000 repair after closing. And at this point, considering the age, most of the homes are going to have replaced the AC or the water heater at one time. So it could be, those two systems could be various ages, and it's just something you want to check out and make sure your realtor knows before you purchase the home, because that could impact what you're going to offer on that house. But overall, this is I think a really incredible neighborhood, mainly because the location. It's one of the newer pockets in this area. It's really, really quiet, and the aesthetics of the neighborhood is just really, really beautiful without being in this giant, large master plan community. And if you are thinking about moving to the East Valley and no one has walked you through the home buying process here in the Phoenix metro area, I do have a link below where you can schedule a call. I'd be happy to talk to you and really address things that are specific to your situation. And also, I do have a playlist right here. I talk a lot about different neighborhoods in Gilbert, particularly several that are less known and not plastered all over Instagram. So go ahead and check that out. Thank you so much for your time, and have a fantastic day.